Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining this breakout room to discuss Goal 5, Affordable Aging. My name is Diane Krantz, and I believe I was asked to moderate this panel because several years ago, I represented the Marin Women's Commission as co-chair of a countywide economic security task force that scratched the surface on some of the issues we'll be talking about today. Speaking of today, in the New York Times, perhaps some of you saw today's article that reported that the national retirement rate rose during the pandemic for the first time in decades. Rising asset values, which is a good thing, might have played a role, but job losses, not such a good thing, were noted to have played a bigger role. People without college degrees, those less likely to hold assets to offset job losses, have been especially hit hard. So the Times ended on a somewhat sanguine, if hollow note. Older workers face discrimination in hiring, newsflash, but maybe a tight labor market will lure some retirees back. Around the country, but certainly here in California, retirement income is being outpaced by rising costs of living. California's fair market rent for a one-bedroom is $1,522, as the Master Plan on Aging notes, while average Social Security benefits is less than that, $1,500. California has the second highest rate of poverty among older adults in the country, leading to high levels of hunger and homelessness. So Goal 5 of the Master Plan, Affordable Aging, is ambitious. Can we achieve economic security for as long as we live? Can we increase economic self-sufficiency? Can we target closing the equity gap? Ending homelessness is one of the strategies of this plan, but we won't be addressing that here. There's another group that is addressing this, and all of this has been recorded, so you'll be able to hear more about that. But we will be addressing the other issues noted in the plan here. And we are so fortunate to have three knowledgeable presenters. Trin Phan is Senior Staff Attorney with Justice of Aging, and she'll discuss the current situation with Social Security and proposed changes on the federal level. Marion Mcbride is President and CEO of the Sonoma Council on Aging, and she'll address food security and innovations in Sonoma. And Elise Hempel is Executive Director of the Petaluma People Services Center, and she'll address older adult employment and ageism in the workplace. So I'm going to ask each panelist to please introduce themselves and their role in their organizations, and then each will have about 10 minutes to address their subject. Participants, if you can hold your questions or actually chat them in the box, at the end we'll have about 15 minutes to exchange Q&A and hear more. So with that, I'll turn it over to our first speaker, Trin Phan.
Great. Thanks, Diane. So again, my name is Trin Phan. I'm with Justice and Aging. We're a national nonprofit that works on policy issues affecting low-income older adults and people with disabilities. I'm on the economic security team and do a lot of work on particularly the SSI program and Social Security. I'm based in Oakland, so I also have a focus on California advocacy. But my piece in today's breakout room is on changes on the horizon for Social Security. The big exciting news here is that we have a new federal administration, and that opens up opportunities for changes to expand and strengthen Social Security. But before talking about some of the proposals, I think it's helpful to think about the context of expansions, because you expand and strengthen the program in order to plan for and address needs. And the question is, what are those needs? What is our society looking like now, since this is one of our large public programs, and what will our society look like in the future? So in terms of who's in our society, so Debbie mentioned in her remarks about that the older adult population is increasingly, our population across the country is increasingly older, and it's also increasingly diverse among the older population. And so that's kind of one thing to think about, because it's not entirely even. So you want to see what your community looks like. So the projections are that by 2060, close to a quarter of people in the US will be age 65 or older. And then among that older adult population by 2060, close to a quarter of that population is going to be immigrant elders. So you see both a growth in the older adult population and a more specific growth among immigrant elders. And that's kind of across the US. I think for some of you in the North Bay, you may already be there or pretty close. And so the way that you're planning is based on what your population looks like. And then another thing to think about in terms of kind of the immigrant elders is that you have documented immigrants and kind of a pretty substantial number of undocumented immigrants as well. So there's that piece of who is it who needs economic security, and what does your community look like today? And what does it look like in the years to come? And another piece of the context is what do we do now and in the future to address the equity gap in elder economic security? And where is it that that gap exists? I hope that the visibility of justice movements in recent years, and particularly this past year, means that we're going to get better at seeing inequalities, understanding how they came about, and making changes. There's a lot to consider in terms of the equity gap for economic security. We have worsening income insecurity, income inequality, with the top 10% having more income than the remaining 90%. We have like weak wage growth with other costs like home prices and college tuition rising much faster than income. We're also, as a society, dealing with impacts of systemic discrimination, ranging from employment discrimination, with wage and income disparities for Black and Hispanic households versus white households. And then during the pandemic, we saw kind of disproportionate job losses affecting Black and Latinx workers. In housing, there are kind of lasting effects of the exclusion of Black communities from programs like federally backed mortgages, significantly lower rates of home ownership among people of color. These are issues that show up before someone becomes an elder, but kind of this systemic discrimination is also the personal history that elders carry into older age, including elders in your community. And so there's the question here, like a lot of these issues are in some ways broader than social insurance, but the question is like, how can social insurance programs help? As we build craft policy, what should it look like? And how can we think about the way we change policies so that they actually address some of those issues and try to kind of ameliorate some of the harms? Then in terms of context as well, I think counties have like states and localities have a stake in the federal programs in the obvious sense that the Social Security provides critical income to residents in every community. And then there's also kind of when the feds take over or are covering some element of economic security, that means that the states and localities don't have to. And then conversely, when kind of you have eligibility restrictions on the federal level, some of that kind of responsibility ends up landing on states and localities. So one example of that was back in 1996 when we had federal welfare legislation that severely restricted eligibility for immigrants for public benefits, SSI, TANF, Medicaid, and food stamps. And so when that happened, you had federal restrictions on eligibility and immigrants losing eligibility for those federal programs. And the states and localities realized that everyone's still here. So it's not, you can't separate some of those restrictions out from the community as a whole. And as states and localities, a lot of states and localities, and California was one of them, filled in that gap. So creating state-only programs for SSI, TANF, Medi-Cal, and CalFresh to kind of mitigate the harm that of the federal restrictions. And so it's kind of it's a joint effort. And what happens in the federal level is part of the planning for what happens in the state and local level as well. Okay, so kind of heading over to what can we do? What kinds of proposals might be coming up, and what are different ways to think about them? I mean, one obvious, so I just just starting with SSI, like one obvious one is I mentioned those immigrant eligibility restrictions from 1996. One thing you can do is just undo them. So think about like what's the balance between what the feds cover and what the states and localities cover. If you undo that, then you have kind of some of that shifting appropriately back to the federal government. And then from like a local and state planning, you can kind of use some of that funding, use some of that effort to expand in other ways. Then another thing is on SSI, I think for a lot of the public benefit programs are pretty out of date in the sense that they're using eligibility criteria that were like income and resource limits from 30 or 40 years ago. And when you don't update eligibility criteria for the programs end up becoming unnaturally restricted. So like the resource limit in SSI of $2,000 or $3,000, for example, I mean, that's 30, 40 years old. And like that's not, it doesn't reflect kind of financial realities of today. And so one of the, for SSI, one of the big sets of proposals is in the Ssi Restoration Act, which we expect to see reintroduced in the House and Senate. It would increase the asset limit, it would basically update the program to reflect today's realities and remove some of the more restrictive criteria, eligibility criteria. So indexing, increasing the asset limits, increasing income exclusions, eliminating some penalties for a marriage penalty and a penalty for people who get help with food or shelter from friends or family. So just making the program less punitive and more reflective of kind of financial realities today. And we expect that act to be reintroduced, but we don't expect that it will pass as a standalone bill. Instead, we're hoping to get one or two SSI reforms in the recovery package that Congress will ultimately put together in the next couple of months.
We have a couple of minutes, so if you could please wrap up. So you have about 2 more minutes.
Okay, that's just about right.
Sorry, yeah.
And that's right. Yeah, so there's that's one aspect of policy changes is how do you update programs so they actually reflect reality, and so that they're actually like at the level of that they actually reflect what we are trying to do and who we are trying to help. And then on the Social Security end, the Chairman Larson is hoping to introduce the Social Security 2100 bill, which would make a number of important updates to Social Security. And he's working with the Biden administration to make sure that it tracks as much as possible with the president's priorities. So that bill would increase benefits, make the trust fund solvent for 50 plus years, maybe longer, depending on what they agree on, and include a targeted benefit bump for low-wage workers to make sure that the minimum level for people who worked for at least 30 years was 125% of the federal poverty level. One caution, so that's something to look out for. One caution is we've also seen a bad Social Security bill come back again. So Senator Romney introduced something that would allow a rescue committee to write legislation to extend the solvency of the trust funds that are endangered. And that would include Social Security. The thing to be careful about with that is that it's kind of a backdoor way to implement cuts in the program by having kind of a shortcut process and not working through the full Congress in its regular process. And the thing to think about here is that Social Security is our big public program. It's incredibly popular. The public supports reforms to increase benefits, and the public also supports ways to pay for these reforms, including modest tax increases. So we run it through the regular process. We're going to get kind of positive benefits and public participation, and we can get it to happen. And it's really appropriate for it to happen in through the full Congress. And I'll do one last, my last pitch is how to advocate for change is one, watch out for the federal legislation that may be coming up and be a part of defining what that national policy should be, because it should reflect community values of communities across the country, influence it to reflect your community's values, what your community looks like today, and what you hope and want your community to look like in the future.
Thank you so much, Trin. There's a lot there, and you raised interesting issues, and I encourage anyone who wants to hear more to chat your questions, and we can return to them at the end of our other two speakers. I'd now like to introduce Marion Mcbride, President and CEO of the Sonoma Council on Aging.
All righty, off mute. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Council on Aging has been serving Sonoma County seniors and their families for 55 years. We have 16 programs and services in the area of social, financial, legal, health, and nutrition. Our largest and most recognizable programs are our senior nutrition programs. And we basically have two. We do the home delivered meals for homebound seniors, Meals on Wheels, for seniors from Rohnert Park, Cotati, all the way up to Cloverdale, Sonoma Valley, out to the Russian River area. And then we also have dining sites throughout Sonoma County for seniors who are still mobile and can benefit from a healthy meal each day. What our seniors through our Meals on Wheels program will tell us when they enter into the program is they're struggling. They're struggling to remain in their homes for the duration of their lives. They don't have access to food. And basically, they are having to choose between food and medicine or food and heat. And these are tough decisions that we don't want our seniors to have to make. So by joining the Meals on Wheels program, at least some of those decisions don't have to be. What we also found out, and this is kind of where the innovation comes in, seniors were sharing their home delivered Meals on Wheels with their pets. And clearly pets add to the quality of their life, but it also takes away from the food that they're receiving each day. We serve approximately 2,000 to 2,500 seniors each year through our Meals on Wheels program. 75% will tell us that that the one meal that we deliver, which is meant to be 1/3 of their daily nutrition, actually represents 50% or more of their daily nutrition intake. So we know that these meals are really needed. And if you take that 50% and they're sharing it with their pets, that means less nutrition that they're getting. So basically what we started a number of years back was a pet program. And basically every single month, we, in partnership with a local feed store, we provide a month's worth of pet food, whether it's a dog or cat. They have the pet food, their pets are going to be fed appropriately, and the seniors are able to actually eat their entire meal. What we discovered through COVID was, well, our numbers increased by 30% on home delivered meals. And that was basically, we believe, because families were trying to support their relatives in their homes. And once COVID hit, that family support kind of had to stop. We have not seen a decline in our numbers as things open back up. So we expect that the Meals on Wheels program will continue to grow as all of us work to remain living in our homes for the duration of our lives. The second program is the dining program, the congregate dining program. Before that, before COVID, we used to serve about 3,000 meals per month to seniors who would come into a senior center. We were working in partnership and doing our meal programs there. Once COVID hit, things got shut down, and we knew that there was a way we needed to reach out to those seniors and provide a meal. So in cooperation with our Adult and Aging, our funder, we were allowed to do drive-up pickup sites throughout Sonoma County. So basically what that looks like is we reached out to all of our congregate diners, and also to our social media network, our e-newsletter network, advertised quite a bit that we would have sites throughout Sonoma County where people could drive up to and pick up a 5-day meal pack-up. We've since moved to a 7-day meal pack-up because clients indicated that they really, really did need that food and they needed a meal for every single day. So we picked neighborhoods. We worked in conjunction with senior centers that we had already been working with, but we wanted to target areas that maybe we hadn't targeted previously. What I can tell you is our numbers jumped from 3,000 meals per month to 10,000 meals per month. We saw a whole new population that we had absolutely never seen before. And what we discovered were these were people who weren't comfortable walking into a senior center and sitting down with people that they didn't know to receive a free meal. But they were able to maintain their dignity by driving up, opening the window, and receiving meals that all they would have to do is reheat it once they got home. So basically, from that, we learned that although we will reopen in senior centers, that we really need to expand to reach the number of seniors who actually need this food. So some of the things that we're going to be doing going forward, we're reopening with a pop-up first. Senior centers aren't ready to reopen. And the reason that we've partnered for so long with senior centers is because they had a dining room, they had a kitchen. It was an easy place to go. Where we've discovered that there are neighborhoods that we definitely need to be in, populations that definitely need to be served, but they don't necessarily have a facility anywhere nearby that's going to allow for that. So with the goal of reaching seniors in their neighborhoods and providing culturally appropriate meals, what you'll see is we'll be doing pop-ups, and we'll basically set up in neighborhoods and invite people from the neighborhood to come in. We're hopeful with supplemental funding that we'll be able to, if we're only there 1 or 2 days a week, that we'll be able to send them home with food for the rest of their week. So again, with a goal of reaching low-income seniors in senior housing facilities, may or may not have dining rooms, may not understand what this could look like, but we're asking everyone to think a little bit outside of the box and let's make this work in a whole new way. So we don't want any of those seniors to disappear. We want to be able to continue serving them, as I said, in the neighborhoods where the help is needed. The other ways we're trying to innovate, we recognize since 2017, when we went through the fires, that service can be interrupted when a fire hits, when a pandemic hits, when a flood, power outages. So what we've really tried to do is do scenario planning. We never know exactly what it's going to look like, but we do know the fire season is going to start earlier this year and probably extend longer. So we are planning in advance. We're delivering to our home delivered clients and our drive up pickup clients shelf stable pack ups so that they have extra food, that they're ready. So in the event that a driver can't get to them, or we don't have the staffing, that will make sure that we have food for people at the time that they need it. So that's one of the things that we're doing. Let's see.
Marion, if you can wrap up.
Absolutely, absolutely. So all of this takes funding. We've been the grateful recipients of Older American Act funding, which unfortunately continues to decline and is also restrictive. So we're looking at other innovative ways of funding the things that we want to do. We rent out our kitchen when we're not using it to generate revenue. We've also created a gourmet food item to sell to seniors who have additional resources, and that'll help subsidize underfunded programs for very low income seniors. So it's a challenge, but we know how important food is to quality of life. And basically that daily check-in, the food means a lot, but to an isolated senior, a person at their door checking on them, making sure that they're safe means the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much. There's so much to delve deeper into that. So maybe we'll have some time at the end. Elise Hempel, Executive Director of Petaluma People Services Center, our last speaker.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So Petaluma People Services Center started in 1974. Our first program was actually home delivered meals, but we provide a variety of services throughout our community, not just in Southern Sonoma County, but throughout the entire county. And our service arena is the older adults programming that we provide, housing, counseling, food access, and then employment. And so I was asked to talk today about employment because employment for older adults is a little bit different than it is for someone right out of college or someone who's mid-career. And when we started to talk about how we were going to speak on this topic, we said, let's kind of outline the opportunities that the Master Plan on Aging gives us, but let's talk about kind of what the call to action would be. As I reviewed the Master Plan on Aging, on affordable aging, what came to me is all of it centers around employment. If we have access to employment or our employer is able to provide us, let's say, an opportunity to invest into a retirement plan, then we're going to have sustainability. If employment changes as we age, what are the kind of opportunities that are available to us? And so this is really an exciting topic for me, in part because we've done some employment programs with our older adults. And I think that those are opportunities for us to build on how we continue to address ageism, how we continue to re-educate each other, and how we continue to look at what the future of aging is going to be in our community. I was so inspired by Diane's talk. If you spend any time with me, you know that I spend a lot of time talking about how the transportation system does not work. Imagine being a 65-year-old who has to take a bus here in Petaluma to get to work, and it's a 3-transfer bus. Imagine being a senior who has to go to work but doesn't have a caregiver for their loved one. Why not build programs that actually allow us, just like we have additional daycare dollars coming into the system through COVID, to allow that person who is employed, who is still working, to actually be able to then use those daycare options to take care of that loved one, so that they're providing those additional services as they continue to age in place. It's interesting. I often think of employment, especially for older adults, and myself included, is that there's the life-enhancing employment choices. So many of us choose to be employed or choose to go to work because we like the socialization. We like how it feels to be able to do the job that we want to do. We like how it gives us an opportunity to be out in our community. And then there's life-sustaining employment. Those are individuals who have probably been teetering on the very low income level for most of their life, probably second or third generation individuals living in poverty. And they have to go to work when they're 70 and 80, 90, because they don't have any other options. Their Social Security has stayed flat. The cost of housing continues to rise. The cost of food continues to rise. And we know they can't take the bus to work. So those are things that we have to address as a community. And as much as it's grand and exciting to have these big, bold plans, I think employment opportunities for older communities need to start at home. They need to start in community. They need to start with the businesses that are actually doing a lot of the day-to-day work. Most of the businesses we have in Sonoma County are not huge businesses. Most of them are smaller businesses that have 2 or 3 employees or 4 or 5 employees. And those are the kinds of lifeline that we have in our community. We, as advocates for seniors or those who are older, really need to advocate with our employers so that they understand the value of that individual, what they bring to the table. I often tell the story, my mom, who's 90 now, her dream job would be to work at Trader Joe's. She worked as a grocery store teller back in the day where you had to push the buttons and I say, Mom, go work at Trader Joe's. They'd love to have you. You show up on time, you don't call in sick. She's like, I'm scared to work the scanner. I'm scared to do that. I don't know how that works. And so there has to be some additional training. PPSC 4 years ago was lucky enough to partner with the YWCA of Marion and provide some additional training for older adults so that they could re-career. And in that recareering opportunity, they were able to expand their opportunities of what they're able to bring to an employer, but they also are able to then mentor that younger generation. You know, it's interesting. I work in an office now where I have young people right out of college, and they often come and they don't really want to know about the job per se, but they want to know the lessons learned. And I think that there's another opportunity for us to start to record lessons learned from older adults as they transition from maybe early retirement into a new career, and what were the pitfalls, what did they learn. Again, those are opportunities to engage that local employer, engage that employer to really help them understand and expand. I am excited that by 2023 the state has decided that every employer has to provide some kind of opportunity for retirement. However, I think there is a plus and a minus to everything. And the plus is we can also take not just the federal and the state kind of mandated programs for retirement, but really go to our local businesses and have them figure out what would work best for their population. I often tell this story, and if anybody's ever been up here to Petaluma and you used to drive down Petaluma Boulevard, you probably stopped and got a soccer ball or tennis shoes at Moreda's sporting goods store. And I remember so clearly about 7 years ago, taking a call from the woman who I actually thought owned the store, but she just was an employee. And she said, I'm going to be homeless. And I said, well, where's your retirement? She said, I don't have retirement. I worked at a sporting goods store. We didn't have retirement. Where's your spouse? Where's your spouse? Well, he died a long time ago. I don't have any of those benefits. And I think those are the opportunities that we have using the master plan and aging to really work with our employers so that they really understand that they have a place in how we age in California, and they have a place where they can contribute, and they have a place where everybody can belong. I think, again, reflecting on the work that we are doing in Aging Together and age-friendly communities, those are opportunities for us to understand this intergenerational piece also. I had to laugh. So again, as we were preparing for this, Catherine said, just send me your LinkedIn profile and I'll just upload it so people can click on your link and they can see what's going on. Well, I got a little panicked, honestly, because the last time I was on my LinkedIn profile was in 2012. So I had to go in and start adding all of the things that I did. And it was a big eye-opener for me to recognize that that's how employers are hiring, myself included, our agency included. We use LinkedIn all the time. Are there opportunities for us to take LinkedIn to senior centers so that they can build their LinkedIn profiles? Because all those little buttons that come up on what kind of skills you're looking at will bring you right to the top of maybe a future employment. And for the record, I actually have had 5 inquiries. So that's a good thing, right? So no, it's important for us to really think of the different opportunities that are available. And I see this master plan on aging as the start of figuring out how to expand and grow programming that really meets the needs of individuals, and use that as a tool to help educate our employers, the people who are actually running the businesses in our community. Because until we spend and invest some time in educating them, we're going to just keep hitting the same old loop. So let's really figure out how we can invest in those individuals.
Thank you, Elise. You have about 30 seconds if you could just sum up.
Well, I'm encouraged by the master plan on aging, but I have to echo what Diane said earlier, or Debbie said earlier. It's so important for us to use this just as a tool to get things started and continue to work with each other to move the needle and look at what's happening and what's successful in other parts of the world and other parts of the country, so that we can actually move faster than that snail page and really get the actions happening. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Oh, thank you to all our speakers. There was a lot there and much to explore. And we don't have a lot of time for questions, but we do have some. So I think Lenore is going to help us facilitate that activity.
Yeah, so if you have a question that you'd like to pose to any of our speakers, we welcome you to just type in the chat to everybody, and I'll read out your question, and then we can all hear it. And we can ask our speakers to respond. Or you might just speak up too. I don't think that there's, we got a lot of time to do that. If that would save some time for a few more questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
Julie, did you have a question?
I did. I was curious about how the pop-up meal service is going to look. I manage a senior center in the Up Valley, and we're the congregate site. And we know that we need to have certain kitchen, and it all needs to be approved. And how does it work with a pop-up system?
We did go through our adult and aging department, and we had a whole plan, which we actually reached out to other programs and asked for input on what they were doing. But we'll have pop-up tents. We will be using cameras to keep everything hot. And what we're looking at for down the line is maybe a food trailer. And the reason that we're looking at that is just there's so many neighborhoods and areas that there just is no there's no kitchen facility, there's no dining facility. I mean, it's going to mean table and chairs, and it's going to mean working around weather. But I think with the lack of, facilities everywhere, or, if we're not able to get back in as soon as we'd like to get in, but we still would like to be able to serve the population. So it'll be a combination, but reach out and we're happy to share a plan with you.
Great, thank you so much. We work with Canby and Napa, and they're our guiding light. So
Perfect.
I'm just curious. Thanks for sharing that.
Marianne, if I could ask a follow-up question to that, has there been any thought given to using pop-up sites for services beyond food delivery and to have them be anchors? I'm working on a vaccine corps, an intergenerational vaccine corps initiative, and one of the things we've been talking about is how best to go into the neighborhoods, and that seems to be an excellent entry point.
Absolutely. In fact, just to pull people in and to get them used to socializing outside, we're going to add a bingo game to it. But here in Santa Rosa, we are going to be doing a pop-up in Roseland, which is the Latino neighborhood. There are already existing pop-ups in the area, and it's become a community gathering place. So I think you'll see more and more of that in neighborhoods throughout all of our counties. But yeah, it's a perfect venue to incorporate other services as well.
Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Sylvia. I really want to address the unemployment or employment factor. Everything from a business perspective is based on profit and money. And if we keep adding things to them, they'll start hiring less people as their costs go up. So how do we counterbalance that? Businesses so far, I know they have checks and balances, but just not enough. They can at will, lay off anybody they want. They can set limits as to when they can offer benefits and then let them go 6 months, at the 6 month point when it was supposed to kick in. Just so many of those kinds of things that just aren't fair to the worker. Somebody works somewhere, thinks they're doing a great job. They buy a house, they have a baby, then they're laid off and can't find work for 2 years. Whether that's at a mom and pop place or a corporation. So I think that's where we need to start. We need to set some guidelines around what is ethical with the population, how ethically businesses, big and small, have to handle employees and support employees and respect employees and not just use them for the moment and then let them go, and then it takes forever to get another job.
Sylvia, I agree 100%. And when I go to sleep at night, as I'm laying awake thinking about how to do that, oftentimes my brain goes to some type of incentives. And since the state of California has put together this master plan, there may be an opportunity for us to lobby or advocate for incentives for hiring those who are 60 and older, or hiring those who maybe have to have a flex schedule. You know, and I also believe that there's some educational components that we need to build into it for an employer. For example, my mother at Trader Joe's, one of the things I told her to say is, look, you don't have to buy my health insurance because I already have that. I only want to work 4 hours a day because that's all I want to work. And so I think that we really need to spotlight some employers and run some pilot programs with medium and large, and then go to the small moms and pops, if you will, the convenience stores, and try to figure out how we can build a model that really will benefit, especially that older population, so that they can go back to work.
Thank you.
Lenore, do we have time for one more question?
I believe so. We've got 2 minutes left, and Javier Torres has a question.
Yeah, I just have a question, observation, but going back to what Trin was talking about, and about all those requisites and encumbrances for actually elders to keep their well-being, you know, because the question is, I know there's maybe a political will right now, but is there actually politicians lobbying to pass new laws that liberate, for example, the new income levels for those social services programs, not only at the state level, but the federal level? You know, you were talking about the Ssi, CalFresh, Medical, everything is connected, but if they don't eliminate those barriers, a lot of things are not going to be possible. There's a lot of people that cannot work. In fact, I think that at certain age, you don't have to work. You know, you have to be, you deserve it because you have lived that long and already participated in this, in the community, that we need to do something really to afford, you know, the living for all the elders.
It's a good call to action, Javier. I don't know if any of our panelists want to take the remaining 48 seconds to respond.
I'll take like 10 seconds. So
Perfect.
totally
Take 20.
agree. And like our systems are connected, and they're purposely connected, and in a good way, in the sense that we can, like, let's take a look at the system as a whole. And then my last comment is that, kind of to what you're saying, that, you know, why at some point people deserve to just like age in peace. Is also with the programs, it's one thing to think about is, why would we make them punitive? So when you're thinking about the community, why would they be punitive? I think that's something we have to think about as a society when we think about the programs.
Thank you so